Combo Breaker is coming up this upcoming weekend for Rivals 2, so I thought it'd be cool to go through the NOLT board and find posts talking about balance, talking about what the devs think about the balance, and talking about specific characters and problems going on within their kits. For our first post, we have add option to hide opponent skins online. The poster says, right now I find some skins either visually unclear or frustrating to play against. One example is the effect of Genesis Arcane or the sounds of Demigod Arcane. I feel like it's unfair that I am disadvantaged simply because of the skin another player chose. In Rivals 1, you were able to hide opponents' buddies and custom colors. Could we please get something like that back? SBS set this to not planned and said, this is something that was included in Rivals 1, but I'm told it isn't really feasible due to online functionality of Rivals 2. This is a bummer to me personally because as much as I enjoy all the skins and seeing them, I do have a few friends that are like, hey, can you not pick this skin, it hurts my eyes, right? Or this skin's extra effects kind of lag my game a little bit because I'm on a lower end PC. So maybe this is something they can get way down the road, but this is a bummer to see. For our next post, this NOLT board poster requested for the Rivals 1 OST to be added to the coin shop. They say, I want to be able to select the OST I want for each stage, and having all of them like in Tekken 8 would be neat. I just really miss Tower of Heaven. I also miss Tower of Heaven, but Dan says, we're planning to add more music options, including potentially accessing other Ether Studio songs. But to do that, we need to add UI support for sound test and other areas to access songs. More music options are something that's important to both our team and Rezo4, but right now it's blocked by availability for our UI programmers. This is a feature that I'm personally excited for because I love the Rivals OST. So I'm excited to hear that it's something they're working on. It's just far off in the future. It definitely is something that it's I can wait for it, I don't need it to play the game, but it would be really cool. For our last planned but far post today, they say, please let us assign emotes to taunts. The poster says there are so many cool emotes with silly phrases on them, but they're so very niche since you can't use them mid-game. Let's say if I pressed left on the D-pad, in addition to the taunt, this emote would appear above me. It would be super fantastic since it would allow for simple communication mid-match and overall the type of silly moments that make this genre shine. Dan responds, this is on our to-do list and has been on it since 2021 actually, so this is a feature they've been wanting to do. But we are waiting until we have a taunt equipping screen built into the character select. And we would bundle the emote equipping onto the same menu. And we don't necessitate that screen until characters get above 4 taunts. So while we definitely want to add this feature, it'll probably be some time before we do it. I'm also okay with this one. This isn't a feature that I need to play the game, but I am excited to hear that it's coming since it does seem so cool. I personally, I'll always taunt if my opponent lands something really cool, so this would be neat to add in so I could kind of be like, whoa, sick combo, even at my expense. For our next post, I thought this one was actually pretty interesting. They say, why do you hate Loxodont? This was the 5th post on this NOLT board, so they got to that pretty quick too. All they said was a frowny face, and Dan's response here was actually pretty cool to me. He said, well, generally we don't put a lot of stock into online win rates, since there's a lot going on and characters that perform better in online matchmaking environments don't always perform the best in tournament brackets, which is true. So, our team likes to take a holistic approach to balancing that considers low-level, mid-level, and tournament-level play. We have a particular focus on how these characters feel to play against, as well as how fun the counterplay is to utilize for this first year of balancing. This is more important than people think. I think counterplay is super important in a game like this. He then goes on to say that, with all that being said, there's only one character who's consistently had the highest win rate across all ELOs since the launch of the game, and has never dropped out of the top 3 win rates in any patch. And his name just so happens to be Loxodont. He also has the coolest skins, to be fair. This part is actually a lie, it's Arcane with the coolest skins, but I love getting to see this behind the scenes, little peek at the developer's notes. However, I do want to correct something that I've seen a lot of people saying. From what I know, whenever he says that Loxodont had the highest win rate across all ELOs, that's averaging all the ELOs. This doesn't mean that he's the highest in Masters and the highest in Wood or Stone, whatever the lowest rank is called. It means that if you take all the ELOs for one patch and you average them, then Lux has the highest win rates, or at least top 3. So just thought I would correct that because I saw a lot of people talking about it. However, I also am of the mind that Loxodont does need a little bit of love, personally. I'm not 100% sure what the devs want to add in, because I think their idea right now is to bring down the power level of the game, from what I can tell at least. But I think it'd be cool to see him get something new added. While we're on the topic of patch notes and game balance, this poster said, "Please nerf Zetter." They said, "I'm so confused. He keeps getting the least amount of nerfs of anyone, Lamau." Which is kinda true. I do get it. He's gone through like a lot of patches, like not unscathed, but with minimal nerfs. SBS says though, "One thing that I can say is that we actually had a pretty significant Zetterburn nerf that didn't make it into the game, because it ended up not working out the way we wanted. We're looking into other options for it though, so that we can get it in a future patch. In a perfect world, we'd be able to get every change in that we want, but we're only able to get so many in each patch due to time and testing. Retooling and then testing again, etc. It isn't a perfect process, and it's something that we're looking into. The solution may be to increase the time between patches to ensure that all changes we want make it in every time, instead of having to scrap some that aren't quite there yet in order to hit a deadline." I'm kind of mixed on this bottom paragraph, but let's talk about the first one first. So we do know that there is like a Zetterburn nerf incoming, and they couldn't make it feel right. I've heard a few rumors about what it was, but I don't want to spread any misinfo today, and I don't have any proof that they were real, so I'll keep those to myself. However, I do think that it is interesting that they're willing to share this. I think it's really cool to get to see this, like, hey, we're looking at it, like we're monitoring the character, we want to like bring his power level down, but we're not sure how to do it 100% right now. For this bottom paragraph though, about how often patches happen, I wonder if maybe putting out smaller patches might be the solution here, but also increasing the time would help as well. I really like smaller patches personally, because let's like use the example of Crag. In that December patch, the first like really big one, he got like a handful of nerfs, right, but nothing gutted him. And then he slowly got a few more changes over time to help get him to where he is now in like a really balanced, like mid-tier-esque state, right? So he's definitely like in a healthy spot now, but that only came because he got small patches over time, and not one big patch like, let's say, Fleet, who arguably has not really ever recovered from her big nerf, you know? So I think smaller patches over time is the solution that I would do, but also increasing the time if they want to keep on doing these like big sizable patches and keep them where they're at is probably also a good idea. Not get too far away from the topic of balance, however, this poster says, "Revert Zetterburn's forward special projectile speed buff." They say, "The stated reason for the buff was the move lacked a bit of utility in neutral after the projectile parry change, as it can now be done on reaction much more reliably." I believe the thought behind this buff is reasonable, but erroneous. Zetter's Fireball being a really reliable, reactionable, but powerful mix-up tool when you caught your opponent unaware was a seemingly great place for the move. Now, the move is inching towards being unreactable at certain ranges at the median elo, which will cause it to become very degenerate. I believe the move was in a much healthier spot before the buff, and hence ought to be reverted. Zetterburn is my secondary, and not once did I think that his Fireball needed to be faster. Players parrying my Fireball was intended counterplay that I felt that I just needed to mix up my options in neutral more when it got parried. Now, I just feel like I should be using Fireball in neutral until I find a clear opening or something else. SBS replies saying, "The speed buff also acts as a nerf in some regards, as it's now more difficult to combo out of. A big combo he had was fair, Fireball, fair. The new speed makes it way harder to get anything off of it. The startup of his Fireball is also 15 frames. By frame 20, it's pictured as is, so it should still be reactable at mid-range. It now takes about 26 frames for the Fireball to get to the same distance his dash attack threatens. So here's a photo of it here. So this isn't anything crazy, you do have like about 15 frames or 20 frames until it's even here, so it's still reactable, as long as you're not like in this range of Zetterburn, you know? So this makes sense. I personally really like the Fireball change, since I think that it added more gameplay to Zetterburn in some ways, and removed some of that combo potential that was a bit too strong for Zetter. But I'm curious what y'all think about it, because I don't personally play Zetter, so if you're a Zetter player, let me know down below what you feel about it. To foil what I just said though, this poster says more big patches instead of constant small patches. They say, "I think for the game, it would be better if we had less balance patches, but when they came, they were bigger. These are my potential proposals. One balance patch per month as opposed to the two that we have now, or what I would prefer, one big balance patch per rank season every 3 months with a mid-season patch update. I think the latter would be better for the game, would mean the devs and the team have more time to test out more meaningful changes and not have to delay and scrap ideas because they don't have enough testing, and it also allows time for the game to develop between patches. so that people can really test changes to see how they're landing instead of the game changing its state every 2 weeks. This doesn't change the skin updates, they should stay the same, strictly talking about character balancing here. I actually do kind of agree that because we do have such impactful changes every 2 weeks, the meta doesn't have a lot of time to develop. And I personally like the idea of one really big balance patch every 3 months, and we would know whenever it was going to happen, because it'd be marked at the start of the ranked season. However, I also feel like the game can feel kind of stale sometimes, like let's say if we're on a patch that's not great, it's really reassuring to know, okay, in 2 weeks we do have a balance change. So maybe keep like small like patches coming every 2 weeks, like let's take the Rano up air change for instance. Let's say if that was added in one of the big balance patches, right? The devs might see like, oh, that was a bit too much, we're going to lower the damage on this, like we're going to increase like the DI multiplier or something, you know? And then that gets patched out in like 2 weeks, and then the move is a lot more fair to play against, but overall the big balance patch only comes every once in a while. I think that'd be a really good solution. This is the last post on this topic, but this poster said, please make bigger balance changes. They say, hi! While I like the direction the game is moving in general, I am of the opinion that we could do with more experimentation and tweaking. I understand the desire to let things settle before big changes are made, but at this point, it feels like such big changes don't exist at all. You talk about how you want Forest Burn to be more distinct, yet the entire change is partially reverting a nerf, and hitting some other moves while leaving big issues like the camera not following smoke completely untouched, and communicating why that is. This definitely does need to be fixed. This feels more like a bug than a balance problem. Orcane has also been wallowing for a while. I understand the state he was in before the changes was a problem, but very little has been done about it. This is also true, Orcane hasn't had a patch in the last, 3 patches, I believe, so he's been the same for a good minute. I don't mind because I play Orcane and I like his state right now, but that's another story for another day. They then go on to say that tiny tweaks can make a big difference, but there is a place for bigger changes. Do something radical with Orcane or Forest Burn. If it doesn't work, revert it, but if it does, we could end up with something far better than what we have now. Make bigger changes to the way Fleet plays, or just to see if we can make the game better. Heck, maybe even an opt-in branch where we tinker with more central mechanics like floor hugging or grab and lag like people have been talking about. I understand that we want to be careful with what we do for the sake of letting the competitive scene flourish, but I feel like we're still at the phase of the game's life where enough things are unsolved that we shouldn't patch at the pace of a fully competitively polished experience. I love Rivals of Aether 2, and I want it to succeed. But it's discouraging seeing characters get gutted, only to know that if you're lucky, you might get an interesting character 3 months down the line. I think that this post gets some things right, with things like Orcane and Forest Burn maybe not feeling as unique as they should, right? However, I don't think that you necessarily need more large patches, right? You just need more targeted patches, right? Like maybe we have a patch where the dev team really looks into Orcane, and then a patch where they really look into Forest Burn, right? You don't have to have some huge jumbo patch where everyone gets a billion notes, you just need a patch for these characters, right? I also think that an opt-in branch where you can tinker with things would be really cool. However, that would also pull players away from the core game mode ranked, and people are also talking about how things like 2v2 and free-for-all don't have enough players as is. So I wonder even though it's a cool idea, how would this be done, and then also preserving the population of those modes, you know? Moving on down though, Dan actually did respond, and I think his response is really interesting. He says, the crux of the issue here is that big sweeping changes are expensive to do, and our gameplay team is really small right now. It's basically just Trevor with some assistance from other programmers on our team when needed. And not only are big sweeping changes expensive, they are often negatively received at first. Look at any of the bigger special reworks across Rivals 1's history. And many times require a few different iterations like Forest Burn's clone, over a long time with multiple attempts and reverts before landing on something that feels a bit more cohesive. Overhauling and reworking moves is basically a black hole of development. While we could have a whole team of people making experimental changes where some would never see the light of day. Unfortunately for us, we are set at the goal of 4 new characters per year, and it's just not possible to be making those big changes and be developing new characters. One other important little tidbit here is that big sweeping changes aren't always better than number changes to find a solution for a specific problem. The sweeping change can be more fun to interact with, especially at first, but often the counterplay just takes time from both players to develop strategies, and from our development team really thinking about the issue from a few different directions before we land on the best compromise. This is why a lot of the changes are number changes, and things that can be updated in hours rather than days. We still have some redesign plans for certain specials that would involve multiple teams like animation, sound effect, and VFX to get involved, but those have to be mapped out in advance and require a lot more coordination than the majority of the buffs and nerfs that we have been doing. I'm kind of curious if we could get an example on this, like what kind of changes are they wanting to do that are like this large? But it is interesting to see like this behind the scenes, like this is why we choose to balance this way just because of our like limited resources. I'm also personally of the mind that the number changes that they are doing are working, right? Like in the most recent online major that HBox hosted, in the top 8, no character was repeated, right? So in a 12 character game, if you have a top 8 where no one's overlapping at all, like that's pretty well balanced, you know, like especially at like top level. So I'd like to see like what balance changes they're cooking, like that they mentioned here, but besides that, I'm pretty content with the game's balance right now, besides a few outliers. Moving on kind of from balance, I saw a few posts talking about Etalus and his changes, so I wanted to bring them up here, kind of similar to the Forestburn changes from a few weeks ago. They say, that time I got reincarnated to another world to buff my worst enemy, Etalus. I'm not an Etalus main, and I'll stop believing Etalus mains deserve rights once he gets that buff. But I want to spitball a few ideas to the devs, since there are a few mechanics and moves on Etalus that I think need some love. I know his overall power is quite solid despite his status as the worst character in the game, but some aspects of his kit seem to be in a pretty clearly bad state to me. Ice Armor just needs something. The Rivals 1 dash attack to Grounded Wave dash back would certainly be justifiable in a vacuum with how hard it is to get Ice Armor. I would get why the devs are being careful with it, since Etalus could be a CC floor hug fiend with it, but Rivals 1 Ice Armor Etalus was so much more effective and harder for me to take advantage of as the opponent. It feels like Fleet Wind Chimes in the neutral level of power at the moment. And I don't think any gimmicks should be both this impotent and hard to set up. I'm sure good Etalus players can leverage its strengths and weaknesses effectively right now, but it making him more vulnerable to combos and even some kill confirms is pretty bad for a character who has to commit to stuff so hard. I wonder if there would be a new way to like tie it to a meter, and then whenever you fill that up, maybe you get Ice Armor, or maybe give them a way to repair it that's not as committal as just using neutral special on ice again. I don't know, there's lots of fun stuff they can do, but that would be one of the big reworks, which we were told we're not getting quite yet. Moving on to their point about Frozen Shields, they also say, I also think that Frozen Shield should get some more love, since it's a really cool concept that's held back by being too difficult to actually set up. Some change that makes down B and neutral B better, maybe with Ice Armor, and maybe add a property to other moves like up B, Fair, and or Ice Armor Strongs that could contribute to a cold meter that eventually freezes a shield. F-Tilt would make a lot of sense, but that move is already extremely good, which is true, that move's crazy. Things like Held Fair, or Held Fair that hasn't absorbed an attack before being released could contribute to it further. Also, since the reward for freezing a shield isn't that high at the moment, they could take a note from the Street Fighter 6 Burnout and modify the shield stun formula if your shield is frozen, and it could modify the shield pushback formula and the pushback versus CC and floor hugging of some moves while the opponent is on ice. I do agree with this. I think that seeing how Frozen Shield could be reworked would be interesting to make it like more of a punished thing. However, I feel like Frozen Shield is already like so rewarding, like it really changes how you have to approach neutral, like you just can't shield as much anymore. I feel like it would be really annoying if Frozen Shield was like a little easier to get, right? Like I feel like that's something that Etalus should have to work for to get such a high reward tool. For F-Strong, they say, F-Strong is also like one of the worst moves in the game at the moment. It's wildly inconsistent for its payoff, so either upping the consistency or making the inconsistency justified somehow by making F-Strong 1 good, and giving F-Strong 2 some crazy pushback or ice or something. I also sort of take issue with F-Strong 2's hitbox versus hurtbox, but it can be justified with Ice F-Strong's armor, which should really just straight up work. I do agree that F-Strong is a little bit weird right now. I followed that move a lot, so I wonder what they want to fix with it. I'm not really sure about how that behind the scenes like hitbox stuff works with connecting moves together. It just should connect better. SBS goes on to respond and say, Etalus got a bunch of buffs and a few nerfs, but the buffs were big in the latest patch. We're not opposed to more in any way, but also the patch just happened and we've already seen Fullstream cook a bit. I'm interested in seeing how the bear does going forward. Reworking some of his ice stuff is one thing. I know we've discussed Frozen Shield recently, but we also don't want to overbuff before people adjust to the new changes. I do agree with this. I feel like any kind of big change to Etalus would need to happen potentially in maybe 2 weeks from now or even a month. Just give it some time to cook because of how well Fullstream did in that Hungry Box bracket. It's okay, is this an outlier or is Etalus actually pretty good right now, right? So I would like to see that. I do think that all these changes, if they happened all at once, would be so crazy, right? But out of these, I think the Frozen Shield being a little bit more rewarding or more useful would be pretty fun to do. As much as I do talk about Ice Armor not being great, I do think it is strong where it's strong, right? And it's not the hardest thing to get if you're good as Etalus. So I don't know if it needs some massive buff, just maybe some kind of way to build up to it that's not the neutral B. And then also, as I said, the Frozen Shield change would be fun, I think it's neat. Keeping on topic with Etalus, this poster says the Etalus multi-up B punish has been removed. Hi everyone, it's my first time NOLT board poster here. My petition today is for the sake of Sauce, the preservation of an emergent mechanic that was birthed from pre-patch Rivals 2 Etalus up B hitbox frame data. I will preface this by saying that I'm not a high-level Etalus player by any means, and my request is based on game feel and Sauce alone. Etalus Cord has been optimizing a niche tech called the Flat Stanley, or multi-up B, since Etalus' Rivals 2 release. However, the recent Etalus up B changes reverted his recovery to its Rivals 1 state, where Etalus is actionable 4 frames faster when in the ascending frame of his up B. While this is a buff to his recovery in some ways, it came at the expense of 4 frame extra startup on the hitbox of his up B. This effectively removes his ability to up B cancel multiple times as a combo starter on a grounded opponent, i.e. Flat Stanley. Example videos down below. In sum, the new patch makes it so that his up B is harder to tech chase with, not able to be comboed into itself more than once, previously could combo into itself twice, which birthed the tech called Flat Stanley, worse to scrap with in close quarters, much less useful to rack up percent from freeze, may not be able to combo into Dare or Dash Attack Waveland, where it previously was saucy in situationals for other combos. I think this patch came with a lot of great Etalus buffs, but I'd also like to see the return of Flat Stanley in the future if possible. They did add a quick edit saying, my suggested change to keep Flat Stanley and preserve some of the niche benefits of the grounded up B listed above would be to revert the grounded startup of up B to its original pre-patch state, but retain the laggier setup on aerial up B only to count for the actionability buff. I think that this would make sense because you're never going to be using grounded up B as a recovery tool, you're only using it as an offensive tool, which I think would maintain the tech but also keep the recovery limited, which is what the devs want. Dan says, yes, the Flat Stanley parable. We discussed this one internally, and we did want to keep the option since we agreed that it's fun, emergent gameplay. However, we also wanted to buff his offstage potential out of up special to be closer to Rivals 1. We couldn't leave the Flat Stanley as is because it was already a strong part of his punish game, and with the actionability buff, it would be even more broken and necessary to his ground game. We also didn't want to remove it entirely. Our solution was the 4 additional frames of startup, which doesn't kill any of the combos from before, other than making and looping it harder, but it does require a bit more setup to get going with the additional startup. There is even potential for some stronger combos here with the new actionability buff, like up special and the down special possibly being more reliable, so we want to give it some time to develop before reinvestigating it. The TLDR is that we know the startup change made this strategy harder, but we still like that it's possible with just repeated up specials seeing a hit from the startup change. We're also monitoring it in general, and we like to keep cool emergent stuff as long as it's not over-centralizing. Hit falling itself was unintended and a bug, so if we feel like the Flat Stanley is not worth going for anymore with the new frame data, we'll reinvestigate the grounded startup, as this is a solid suggestion. I do agree that it is a solid suggestion. However, I also do understand that because you're actionable out of up B faster now, you could get a lot of crazier stuff. So maybe it's good to leave this move undertuned. I'd like to see how it develops, and where Etalus goes in this meta. I think he's really in an interesting spot where I could see him becoming very strong, or just kind of not really going anywhere and needing more changes. But we'll only see that with time, For a change coming up really soon, we have chatting before the rank set ends. This poster says, it was always really nice on Rivals 1, where even if I lost in ranked, my opponent would give me a good game, or I'll get you next time, thank you. It was really nice and made me remember to not take rank so seriously and just have fun. Right now, you play a set and you lose the chance to talk to your opponent before you can even say GG's. SBS says that we're working on this feature. You can expect it pretty soon, but not quite in our mid-month patch for May. I'm excited for this. That's something that I was missing from Rivals 1. I kind of hope it's tied to like maybe the win screen or the lose screen. You just like tap on your D-pad to say like good game, like thank you, something like that, I think it'd be cool and snappy, but we'll see how it turns out. Another planned feature is taunting on the Angel platform. Like in Rivals 1, they won it back. And their body paragraph is just the title. Dan said, Trevor's been planning to do this, he just hasn't had time to prioritize it since launch. We'll move it up his to-do list and try to get it in soon. I am excited to see this back, especially if we do get those taunt changes where we can like assign like a little emote to them. I think that would be really sick to be able to send like a little message, especially like, whoa, like crazy combo, like, or like, oopsies telling me I SD'd. There's one of the emotes that says like, my computer's melting. I think that would be funny, like if I like fuck something up and I say that, Like, I don't know, just fun changes all around for that. Moving on to posts that don't have any dev responses, I've only picked out a few because the video is already kind of long as is. Let me know what y'all think about the different video links, by the way. I'm trying to see what you guys like. But this post was interesting to me. It said, make physical parries worth going for. They say, in all of the Rivals 2 Championship Series top 8 games, that was 43 games total, there was one single parry on a physical move that stunned the opponent. Other than that, there were 2 jab parries and 3 icicle parries. I didn't count other projectile parries since those are obviously pretty easy on reaction and not the issue. Right now, the risk-reward of going for parry is extremely skewed against it compared to floor-hugging, shielding, rolling, or wave dash. Zetter's Shine follow-up is one where people often say parry is a way to counter. In the best case scenario, reward for a parry is a strong attack kill at high percent. More likely, you will just go for a grab or other free percent bread and butter strings. Worst case scenario though, Zetter just waits half a second and gets Shine, Nair, Dare, or anything, and it most likely will lead into a kill, if not more percent than your parry would have. If you know that they're going to attack you, dashing out or floor hugging gives you the same opportunity to grab or counter without the added risk of parry lag. I honestly don't know what needs to be done to fix this, whether that means adding more parry frames and less lag after, or making it start faster. It might lead to more grabs or campy behavior. But right now, no one is going for parries because they're simply not worth the risk. I agree with this. I'm not sure how I would buff it. I feel like the obvious on paper, response, right, is like, oh, okay, you just make parry faster, right? Like, you make the risk reward, less risky. However, I do feel like that would also lead to the campier gameplay where it's like, okay, I don't want to throw out a move because I know my opponent can just parry on reaction, and now I'm, up a creek, So I do wonder how they do buff this, but I agree, parrying seems to be, in my opinion at least, pretty weak overall. But I do like it being used as a reflector and a universal counter to projectiles. So I'm not really sure what I would do with the mechanic, truthfully. I'm curious what y'all think though, so let me know. For our last 2 posts, I've picked these out because they both talk about individual characters that are a bit lower on the tier list right now. They say, help, I need a fleet buff from Dan. These are spitballs, by the way, and I haven't fully thought them through. I just think there's some small problems, and I wanted to see if any of my ideas can inspire the devs. Fleet's in a good place right now, and I appreciate how her design has evolved to be healthier over time. This isn't a Fleet is bad post, she's viable and fun. I just think there's a couple gimmicks that are probably not really rounded out. Wind chimes are high risk with middling reward. Wind chimes are a fairly big boon for Fleet already, since Neutral B itself is a really fun tech option and a magic trick enabler. And chime combos are very devastating. But there's an odd aspect to when it's most useful when you're already getting a good combo, or going to have the opponent in disadvantage, versus feeling like a genuine liability when applied in Neutral. Trades will transfer the chime back to Fleet, and Fleet doesn't have the tools to reliably stop the opponent from rushing in and forcing the trade. I think it clashes with a lot of Fleet's weaknesses that have been emphasized over the course of the patches, so it's worth to look at some things that could benefit it in this context. Option A, let Fleet apply chimes to herself, let her shoot her own kneecaps with down B or whatever. When I self-apply through jab trades, I've often gotten better mileage than when landing it on opponents in Neutral. At the very least, this can be a fun gambit that lets stamina play a bigger role. And it would be nice for a character who has a lot of defensive counterplay to be able to put the opponent into a bind for dash dancing themselves into the corner trying to whiff punish her approach. Option B includes everything below, and it's a lot. Tweak how chimes behave on trade. Stall the explosion slightly by delaying it until hit stun ends, or a few frames. Post-hit pause, and it would give Fleet real reward for clean neutral wins like a fair intercept or grab to throw follow-ups. At the moment, opponents can currently start an approach at a timing that minimizes all bonuses that Chime would usually give Fleet in a combo, while still giving full reward if they are successful. Molo's Rivals 1 bomb delay shows that there's precedent. I personally really like this idea. I even feel like if you reset the win chime whenever it's transferred, it could be like a little game of hot potato, you know? But it would also maybe like make the pressure a bit worse because you would be resetting it each time, I'm not sure. They then go on to say, also, I'd love to see a parry intangibility modifier for it. When Fleet lands her chime and tries to play around the opponent transferring it back onto her, that gives opponents free space to run away, parry, and then gain free advantage state. I don't dislike parry as counterplay, but the reward feels disjointed for how much riskier it is for Fleet to approach in a way that meaningfully prevents it. Reducing parry intangibility from chimes would prevent the opponent's safest counterplay option from being unusually strong. I really like this idea, just kind of like lowering down how much bonuses you get, because I do think that parry should give you a bonus, but in this situation, it's like parry on a timer, right? It's pretty easy to do, so I think scaling back that bonus would make sense. Versus Claren, the mechanic just doesn't function. No Fun Zone gives Claren a great attack she can use from anywhere upon explosion, and if she uses No Fun Zone to counter another move, it even gets reflected back onto Fleet. It's not even that the matchup is awful anymore, it's that this part of her kit becomes unreliable. When No Fun Zone is parried, I think it should remove Claren's counter intangibility and reapply the chime from the start. Even a hardline exception like not letting Claren counter chime at all would be warranted. The counterplay is very limited, and the only thing stopping Claren from doing this literally every time is that she's already really good at hitting it back on the Fleet. Why should she get to do this? I feel like this is just like a matchup thing, right? Like, it does suck for Fleet players, right? Like, it's like, oh man, like, bummer, your win chime's like bad in this matchup. But this is something that Claren should excel at. It's kind of built into her kit, so it makes sense here, for me at least. Finally, they go on to say, Down B feels like a vestigial tool. Fleet's down special is one of her riskier and more inconsistent moves. It has utility in edge guards, recovering, and in her magic tricks, but its use cases in neutral feel like RNG levels of unreliability. The intangibility is unreliable and doesn't necessarily give me a hit. I've tried to use this move versus Claren's Dare, but it hits way too high at the end bit for that. And I've never felt like I made any sort of meaningful decision that led to them standing in its path, whenever I do manage to hit it. I'd definitely take the removal of the intangibility if it can give better utility elsewhere, since I think its current state as an attack is a weak gamble where I don't feel like I have a reasonable way to make my opponent likely to stand in its line of fire. It doesn't really feel like I did anything to make it hit when it does work. I don't think the move is useless, but it feels like it's held back by the original idea for it. Right now, it mostly sees value in recovery, where it serves as a weak mix-up and a way to boost Fleet from off-screen to the wall. Even off-screen though, it's really telegraphed and has poor mobility options that will sometimes just get her hit. The intangibility is nice when going to the wall, but I'm not sure giving Fleet more chances to accidentally reversal someone who went for an edge guard is a strength that I care for. I actually do agree with this bottom part here that offstage the move is like kind of bad whenever it's like bad, right? Like it's like very telegraphed, which is fine for recovery, right? Recoveries like shouldn't be great. However, like giving Fleet more ways to reversal people where it's like, okay, like we're gonna make the move better, we'll add more iframes, right? It's like, that also would be like a bummer. I'm personally not really sure how you buff this. I wonder if you can maybe let her cancel it, kind of like Zetterburn down B, right? Like, she can get the initial, like, jump, and then it's like, oh haha, just kidding, like, I didn't shoot the arrow, and now, like, I'm above you, right? Give her, like, a new way to hop or move. That could be interesting, I guess, but I'm not really sure if that's something they're wanting to give to Fleet, you know? So overall, I would like to see this move, like, reworked or just, like, looked at a little bit, but I'm also okay with the move in a kit not being, like, the most useful in every scenario, you know? There should be versatility to moves, but they shouldn't necessarily apply to every situation. The original poster goes down to add a few more things, and they say, while the edge cancel is appreciated, regular edge cancels don't really seem that good, and a piercing shot edge cancel is so tight to execute in situational that it feels more like a training mode magic trick than something that can be reasonably integrated into a game plan, especially when the other barely practical magic tricks are more rewarding. Why would I just not practice those instead? If Fleet's best use case of this tool is to rely on tech, then either a piercing shot or the edge cancel, it should probably be made easier. I can't really speak on this one too much, I'm gonna be real. I don't use Fleet too often, and my friends that do play Fleet have a lot of other like cool little techs they use than necessarily this one a lot. So I feel like this would maybe need to be looked at by someone like that plays Fleet, so if you do, let me know. Finally, her Empowered Jab 3 plus Empowered Moveset Thought. Empowered Jab 3 is one of Fleet's necessary mix-up versus Floor Hug, but when it gets crouch cancelled or floor hugged at low percents, she can end up punished hard for it, even more so if chimes are active. I don't think this needs to beat floor hugging outright, but it needs to do something that prevents Jab 3 from being floor hugged to not skyrocket in risk, just because the bow is glowing at the moment. It might also help if empowered arrows cling to or beat other projectiles more reliably, maybe without applying chimes in those cases. That way you're losing a key resource and getting stuffed for using it. I'm thinking something like how Street Fighter 6 lets multi-hit projectiles beat single hits. I actually personally think this is a bad idea. I feel like a lot of the times in fighting games, right, you need to have that readability of knowing what moves will work and in what ways, so giving this depth would be cool, like, to use, right, but I think it'd be really hard as a player to be like, oh, okay, like, Fleet has an empowered arrow, I can't throw my fireball right now, you know? So I feel like this could be cool in theory, but bad in practice. Moving on, though, they say, lastly, running out of apples makes aerial neutral be quite laggy. That might be fine as a resource management consequence, but it's strange that the real penalty for being out of stamina isn't losing access to the chime mechanic, it's having a bunch of our magic tricks disabled. A way to cancel empowered arrow shots would at least help avoid wasting stamina on down Bs just meant for recovering or movement. Again, Fleet is genuinely in a neat spot, and I love where she's headed. These are just a few areas where a few tools feel like they don't work in ways they seem that they should, and trying to make effective use of them requires near-perfect setups or risk disproportionate punishes. Changes like these would fill in the gaps of an otherwise really fun character design. Personally, I really like the change ideas to how neutral B would work, right? I don't really like the versus Claren idea. I feel like Claren should have her strengths in that manner, right? But in ways where it's like the chime might need to last longer after it's passed around, or maybe change like what rewards and risks Fleet has in neutral for applying it. That would be pretty interesting. Truthfully, down B I'm not as educated on because I don't play Fleet anymore. I played her before Arcane came out in the beta, but that was so long ago, I really wouldn't take my opinion on her at all. So I do think that this is interesting, and I think the move does need some form of help, but also it doesn't have to be the best move in her kit, you know? And for Jab 3 and the empowered mechanics, I feel like Jab 3 is a bit risky at lower percents, but it's okay for moves to be riskier, and I think that would be fixed a lot of the times if they did make these changes to how the wind chime worked. That's going to wrap up our NOLT board overview for today. I know this one was really long, but I really wanted to talk about a lot of the game's balance and different ideas going around it before Combo Breaker. I really hope you guys enjoy all of the tournament, and I personally want to do some VOD review stuff, so if there's a set y'all see at Combo Breaker that y'all want me to review, go ahead and link it to me down below. I hope y'all have a great week, and I'll see you on the next one though. Bye for now!